On today's episode of Elder Scrolls 6 Theory Videos, we're going to be looking into the possible setting of Blackmarsh, or Argonia, or Tamriel's garbage heap, if you maybe want to call it that. Anyway, let's go! So, as a quick intro to the video, I just want to quickly clear something up. There's a huge hoax on the internet going around at the moment that Elder Scrolls 6 Argonia, as it's been called, has been confirmed. Let me just put those fears to rest. It is not confirmed, it's a complete internet hoax. It's all going through a third party. Bethesda has not confirmed anything. I'm not saying that it won't be set in Blackmarsh, but I'm saying that it hasn't been confirmed by anyone. This case that's been going around is complete and utter bull honky. So, let's talk about Blackmarsh as a province. It's well, in the southeast of Tamriel. It's got a nice oceany part to it, unlike Cyrodiil. It's one of the larger provinces. It's approximately 100,000 square miles, which is pretty big. Blackmarsh borders Morrowind and Cyrodiil. It also is quite close to the Capman land of Elsewhere, but we'll talk about that one in another episode. But this, in particular province's geography is very interesting, and it comes into kind of the culture and history of this province a lot. Blackmarsh is, of course, home to the Argonians, who, like their homeland, are shrouded in mystery. So, I'm going to go through the brief history of Blackmarsh, just so I can give you a brief idea on what kind of a place it is, because its history and what's known about it is not much. Not many people know how Blackmarsh works or how the Argonians live there, but I'm going to go through a brief history of it. Now, all we really know is from the First Era. Now, in the First Era, there were very, very few Argonians that ever left Blackmarsh, because it was their homeland, and even the Argonians that did, they never really talked about their history or their culture, so what any other race on Tamriel knows, they know very, very little. What is known is that Blackmarsh was a haven for bandits and thieves, as, well, basically it's kind of a clusterfuck in there. If you want to lose the law, here's a figure of speech kind of, well, Blackmarsh is the kind of place to do it. So therefore people such as pirates, thieves, bandits would often use it as some sort of stronghold, if that makes sense. One of man's first accounts of Blackmarsh was in the First Era, when bandits, pirates, and thieves would make use of the swampland to hide from their enemies, which at this point would be an empire. It wasn't until the Empress Hestra demanded that a bandit leader's head would be delivered to her. Basically, this bandit had been a very large thorn in her side. For this reason, the Imperial Navy attacked a bay in Blackmarsh to remove this mass congregation of criminals. Now, unfortunately, this bandit leader escaped and headed deeper into Blackmarsh, and feeling that they had to, the Imperial Navy followed. This basically meant that the Imperials headed deeper and deeper into Blackmarsh than anyone who wasn't an Argonian had ever been before. And you'll find out why that's weird in a bit. The next real account is when the Reman Empire conquered Blackmarsh. Now, they did this for, well, God knows what reason, because really Blackmarsh is worthless to most people, but it's seen as part of Tamriel, and therefore an empire would want to have it. Now, this is quite an interesting thing. The Argonians retreated to the city of Hellstorm, which is in the north of Blackmarsh, which is close to the border of Morrowind, which means, loosely, that the Dunmer, the Dark Elves of Morrowind, came down and enslaved a lot of the Argonians and took them back to Morrowind. See, I think I mentioned this before. The Dunmer have been using Argonian slaves for quite a while, which is quite an interesting and controversial thing in the Elder Scrolls universe. Now, I want to talk a bit about the geography of Blackmarsh, as it really does set it apart from the rest of Tamriel. Well, as the name suggests, it's made up primarily of swamps and marshes, with long rivers and lakes, with trees older than many of the races on Tamriel itself. For this reason, the land is fairly worthless. Yeah, I know. In terms of farming, it would be relatively impossible in its current state, and mining would be relatively a death sentence with the huge amounts of water on the surface. There's also the simple fact that Blackmarsh is home to some of the most deadly diseases on Tamriel. It's believed that the Khajiitan flu, a disease that wiped out huge amounts of Khajiit Elsewhere, had originated in these deep swamps. For this reason, the Argonians have developed somewhat of a natural immunity to most poisons. It's for reasons such as this that not even Tiber Septim, yes, that's right, Talos himself, the proclaimed Ninth Divine, never actually put his Imperial legions to take Blackmarsh. Instead, he conquered the outskirts, and central Blackmarsh, the part which would be disease-ridden and very difficult to take, was more or less peacefully incorporated into the Empire. More or less, the Argonians basically signed a piece of paper to stop any empires or the Imperials from harassing them at the borders. Blackmarsh has a total of 8 notable cities, at least that what we know of. Ancon, Black Rose, Gideon, Hellstorm, Lilmuth, Solrest, Stormhold, and Thorn. Now, in terms of architecture, yes, I'm going to go on about architecture again. There's a pretty good range. Of course, there's the pretty boring mud huts that's maybe placed in the middle of a lake. But there's also temples and other fortified buildings, or ruins, that have a really interesting aesthetics. It kind of gives off an Aztec vibe, if you understand what I mean. I have to admit, I kind of like it in terms of how it would be in the game, and they would probably be the equivalent of the Iliad or Nordic ruins that we've seen in Oblivion and Skyrim. Now I want to talk about an interesting feature of Blackmarsh. It's politics. Wow, I never thought I would say that. Now, being shrouded in, well, mystery, no one really knows who runs the place, except for the Argonians, but good luck trying to get them to tell you. One pretty wacky theory is that Blackmarsh is run by the Hist. Now, the Hist are an ancient tree that is believed to be the original inhabitants of Tamriel. Now, we know that these trees are very highly regarded by the Argonians, and many even believe that the Argonians themselves are descendants of the trees, which, you know, I guess is sort of possible. This is supported by the fact that a newly hatched Argonian will drink the sap of the Hist, as it's believed to give it its soul. It's also believed that during the Oblivion crisis, the Hist made the Argonian military aware that the crisis was coming, so that when it happened, the Argonians quickly defeated the Daedra coming through from Oblivion. Apparently, the Daedra even sealed the gate off, so, well, going from Nirn to Oblivion, as they feared that the Anaxiel would attempt to invade through the gate. So, basically, they thought that the Argonians were going to invade Oblivion. So, as for the setting, it's very, very interesting. So, if the game was to take place in Blackmarsh, we would have a wide array of terrain, and it would be incredibly interesting. Whilst in many of the other games the terrain was seamlessly more flat, this would be very water-based. It would have a lot of obstacles. There wouldn't be direct routes to places. Very, very little clear land, which would be very interesting, especially if they were to incorporate some sort of climbing mechanic, which would probably be somewhat necessary in these sorts of kind of settings. Now, speaking of the Anaxiel, they are another possibility for the ruling force of Blackmarsh, or at least the main military power. This is supported by the mention of the Argonian royal court, suggesting that there is a king of Blackmarsh. Of course, no one really knows. The Anaxiel are very dangerous, and have even invaded Morrowind on multiple occasions to reap vengeance for the Dunmer enslaving their kin. Obviously, this tit-for-tat between the Dunmer and the Argonians has led to a lot of frustrations between them, and put it this way, neither of the two races particularly like one another. We definitely know that there is some form of military in Blackmarsh, as Argonians born under the sign of the Shadow become something named as a Shadow Scale. These are basically assassins that are believed to be used by the King of Argonia to quickly end conflicts. They're trained from, well, pretty much as soon as they hatch, and they're very, very, very dangerous. Now I should probably talk about gameplay and what kind of crazy fun you would have, so I guess I'll start with creatures. Of course, Blackmarsh is home to the Argonians and the Hist and some other very odd sorts of creatures that many believe to be extinct. But again, we're kind of confused when it comes to the lore, because there's no huge amounts of, well, history going into the creatures of Blackmarsh, which makes it difficult for me to say what there will be and what there won't be. So, if it was going to be turned into the setting of the new game, it would definitely be interesting to see what kind of creatures were there. Now I want to talk about story, because one thing that Blackmarsh has a lot of potential for is story. An important point that we do have to remember when we talk about things such as storyline is that there's obviously quite a bit of history, but I feel as if we would definitely be taking part of something that happened post the events of Skyrim. At this point in the lore, the Argonians are not actually part of the Empire. They haven't been ever since the Oblivion Crisis. Shortly after it, basically Blackmarsh pretty much seceded from the Empire. This was believed to be the work of the Anaxil. Of course, there's a slight issue with all of this. The simple fact that majority of the people there will be Argonians, and I know to some people that may not be overly appealing, because Argonians never really take a major role in any of the other games, which means that basically when it does come to a game where Argonians are going to be the main people who you're going to communicate with, it could be a considerable pain in the arse. It's for reasons like this that we would need to rationalise the fact that why our character would be in Blackmarsh if they're not an Argonian, because realistically, no other race really goes to Blackmarsh. For that reason, I believe that the storyline's going to have to be quite broad. It's going to have to cover quite a lot of points. As well as that, it would need to kind of rationalise the reason why our character isn't dying from disease. For that reason, I've kind of come up with somewhat of a base sort of storyline in terms of some random ideas. So one idea that I was thinking is some sort of conquest in Argonia. So basically maybe the Imperials and the Empire, along with maybe the Dark Elves, are coming and invading Blackmarsh because of diseases there, or because they need to expand their empire. And obviously that means clearing away all this swampland. So it would be the Empire and the Dark Elves against, well, the Argonians, the Anaxil, who are obviously trying to defend their home. They'd be trying to defend the Hist trees that would be getting torn down. It would be very interesting, and you could definitely incorporate that into the main quest, similarly to how the Civil War quest was incorporated into Skyrim, which played a huge part in the entire game. So you could have two rival factions of the Empire, along with the Dark Elves, going against the Anaxil and the other Argonians in sort of a huge war. This would also maybe allow the character to actually kind of have reason to be in Blackmarsh. Maybe he was there as a job, or just something to give it a bit of context. As well as that, if the forests and all of the swamps are being cleared, it would mean that diseases would be less common, so it would kind of give reason for why the character wouldn't be dying. Now we've come to that pinnacle point in the episode. Do I or do I not think that Blackmarsh would be a good location to set Elder Scrolls 6? Well, yeah. Now, I doubt the people who made that hoax about Elder Scrolls 6 Argonia being confirmed knew any of this information, but actually thinking about it, if the storyline's correct and the atmosphere's correct, Argonia could be, or Blackmarsh could be, a very, very cool place to set Elder Scrolls 6. In terms of storyline, it definitely needs to cover a lot of reasons about why the character will be there, but if it could do something similar to kind of what I've suggested with the Empire and the Dark Elves kind of trying to move in and clearing the swamps to make room for fields, similar to an issue that we have in our real world, like things such as deforestation so people can raise cattle. The Empire and Blackmarsh would definitely be interested in doing that kind of stuff, as they would be able to get more crops, especially if they were, for instance, trying to go back to war, because obviously a lot of stuff had been destroyed after the Great War. So I think that Blackmarsh has a lot of potential for storyline. As well as that, if mechanics such as climbing and swimming were also utilised, it could be a really, really interesting place to explore. As well as that, if you are a big fan of the lore, you'd be majorly interested in looking into, well, how Blackmarsh is run, what kind of creatures are there, who's really in control. So yeah, for that reason, I kind of think that Blackmarsh would be a pretty good place to set Elder Scrolls 6. Assuming they do it right and give reasons for the character being there, of course. And I swear to God, if I get flogged off with being the Histborn or something, then I'm going to be so upset. So that's pretty much it for the episode. Please do pop down in the comments below if you think that Blackmarsh would be a good location to set Elder Scrolls 6, and if not, where would you prefer to see it? Please do like, comment and subscribe if you did enjoy the video. I hope you did, and I'll see you next time.